Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Crown Tree Media podcast, where we will be discussing all things fantasy and dive deep. But today, we are going to be talking about The Will of the Many by James Islington. Wow, what a book. I have so many things to say about it. I cannot wait. We're going to break this up into parts where we'll first do a summary just to refresh everyone on the epicness of this novel, first reactions, favorite quotes, the magic system, the world building, and then at the end, we'll open it up to kind of theories and discussions around how he chose to end this story. My name's Olivia Tranfo. I will be your podcast host. We have with me Sarah Tranfo and Joe Tranfo, my sister and my father. Welcome. Okay. I want to start with first reactions before summary because I'm just so curious. Father, what did you think?
I thought it was terrific. It didn't change my life. Don't know if it's going to end up in my pantheon when all is said and done, but I think Islington deserves huge credit for, and I know I'm going to steal some of Sarah's thunder here, for using the Roman Empire or the Roman Republic as a setting. I think that's unusual for the world of fantasy, at least to me. I'm sure that there are people out there that are going to be able to cite 58 other novels that have used that setting, but it was new to me. I really liked because I think it has very interesting relevance to our world, the real world, today's world of 2023. I really liked this, and I'm not even sure that it's a magic system, but whatever will is, that is really interesting to me, and I'm going to be very interested to see how that develops through additional books. At least as I sit here right now, I can't tell you I really understand it. So I thought those two factors alone make it terrific, but it's well written. The plot moves along. It's something for everyone. And there are a couple of quibbles, but we'll get to them in due course.
Sarah?
All right. So as someone who brought the novel to my family, who read it first and then recommended it, and now it's gone through everyone, I really loved it. I think that the novel, as in new kind of unique setting, was just the kind of gateway drug, so to speak, to a book that actually moved so quick and was so cinematic. But I think what this book does really well, and something that I think a lot of modern fantasy tends to fail at, is that it was not afraid to use classic fantasy tropes, but it did it in a way that made them feel fresh without trying its damnedest to subvert them. I am at a point in kind of modern fantasy where I'm a little bit over the kind of very forced subversion of all the classic tropes. I think these tropes are classic for a reason, and there's a reason why people love to read them. And I think James Islington did such a good job at taking some well-worn ideas, and we'll get to them, but the kind of the Lost Prince and the main character that's very good at a lot of things, war/magic school, all of these tropes that we've read 100 times, but he's able to make them fresh and I think a little bit more unique than the average writer. And how he writes the story, and I think we'll get to it, but the tense and the point of view he chose to write it from is very unique. And I think that actually really, really helped in keeping this story incredibly or feeling incredibly new, and a real, in my opinion, a real triumph in the fantasy novel, at least over the last, let's say, 5-10 years. I think that it just felt really, really, really unique in that way. And yeah, I loved it. I absolutely devoured it.
Same. So fair. It might not have changed my life, but it kind of did in the short term because, oh boy, I mean, I had no idea how much I was craving the university moments of the gang getting together. It had like just the most epic relationship with a cave makeout scene with, I mean, it scratched so many itches for me. And it's interesting because at the end of the novel, I never read these, about the author, but I did because I was on such a high when I finished this book that I actually read on the flap of the hardcover. And he said he's influenced from The Name of the Wind and Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn, which I thought was really interesting because for me, this book read way more like a Red Rising in terms of how the plot just moved. Like he went from scene to scene. Talk about like the editing of this book, right? When I think of traditional fantasy, Jordan, Robert Jordan and Tolkien, I mean, there are just chapters that could have been deleted. But
maybe not Tolkien, but
maybe not deleted. Let's
but point made, point taken.
I totally think
the editing was just, it was, everyone needs to, who's ever edited this book deserves a gold star, in my opinion.
100%. He's not overly famous yet, so people actually edit him. He hasn't gotten to the point where people just say every word is gold, my darling.
And and I don't know about you guys, but even from the beginning, like I was hooked. Like I immediately started, and that's another thing where a lot of modern fantasy fails. It's they want to make it's the anti-hero, right? They want to bring you in with the main character, but he's really, really desperately flawed. Where there was something, I was immediately hooked by Viz or Diago, however you want to say it. What did he do? What did this author do so well that hooked us right in the beginning? Like why did I care so much about Viz from the chapter 1?
I can give an answer. I think he is very much in the vein of a Jon Snow kind of a character. I think that, again, ironically, with the emergence of Game of Thrones being this kind of overwhelmingly popular fantasy novel of this century, and I think you see in a lot of George R. R. Martin's disciples, Joe Abercrombie kind of chief among them, but this kind of maybe a bit of a reluctance to have a fantasy hero that's just kind of like the classic fantasy hero. And here's Viz, who is a secret prince, but he's now an orphan. It's like he's two of the most well-worn tropes in one. And he is young, but not young adult young. He's not 15, he's not Harry Potter. So he's an adult, and he's dealing with more adult things. And I think that having him be kind of authentically, let's not say good, but at least authentically has his own very strident ethical ideas.
Virtuous would be a word.
Virtuous, that's a great word. And he's kind of, he doesn't have this kind of mark of like original sin. He hasn't really sinned yet. He's kind of he's been through a lot, but he's not evil, or he's not an anti-hero. He's not gray. And I think
how about this? How about he's also strong and he kicks ass? How about that?
He's not
it doesn't have to be overly complicated, right? He's not going to be played, with all due respect, by Timothée Chalamet. He's not going to be played by Hemsworth or The Rock, but he's not beta. He's a young man, and I think that is desperately lacking in a lot of 21st century stuff.
Interesting. So yes, because one of the notes I made when I was looking back on part 1 was his gladiator fight against the Sextus in the nude. Like, and so, as I was kind of alluding to earlier, right, you have this epic pacing, these really intriguing plot moments that describe and paint the picture of Viz. But then you also have, I think, threaded through this novel, where unlike a Red Rising, right, you have a prose-like approach with a little bit of Patrick Rothfuss in terms of some of the themes and questions he explores that are sprinkled in right in the beginning, early on, right at the top of some chapters. He'll do a look back of, conversations he had with his mom or with his father, and that's when James Islington is able to really showcase his prose and his, more linguistic style of writing. And I think for me, at the beginning, it was that 1-2 punch of he's really good at plot, but he also knows how to craft a really good sentence. And one I highlighted was, chain your anger in the dark, my mother used to tell me, and it will only thrive, right? That coupled then with this epic gladiator scene in the nude, it's like, oh, that's just so good. It worked. It worked for me so well in the beginning that I was so bought in really early on.
And I think this is where, because we were talking about the beginning, and so before we move on, this is actually where I want to bring up the tense and the point of view that Islington chose. So he chose to do this in first person present, which is very, very rare, especially for fantasy books. So basically this means that we spend this entire novel in Viz's head and completely from his point of view as everything is happening. So most books that you and I will read in the fantasy genre, are really in most genres, is third person past. And having this be first person present was a really ballsy move by Islington, in my opinion, because you have to, if you're going to spend whatever it is, 400, 500 pages in the head of a character, he has to not be annoying. He has to not be tedious. You have to want to be there. You have to want to live in that.
Racked with self-doubt or brooding.
Exactly.
Jon Snow.
He can't, you're so right, Dad. He can't be overly anxiety ridden. He can't be too cautious. He also can't be an idiot. He can't be like a dumb jock. He has to have an internal life. And I think that but I do think that this choice was a very easy way to get us immediately invested into into Viz as a character. It's really, really easy when you're just like, you're thrown straight into basically right behind his eyes. And I think we'll discuss it later, but having to be in someone's head as they think through every decision is really, really unique. And I think in a book where we have someone trying desperately to hide their identity, it adds a really unique layer of tension to nearly every scene. He has a conversation with someone who doesn't know who he really is. And yeah, I thought it was really effective. Good choice.
Great. Now, moving on to, so we had this beginning in, he's an orphan boy, gladiator. And then you kind of have this mentor-esque figure enter the picture with Ulquiskor. That is my attempt of pronunciation. And this is when it starts, I think, leaning into maybe some of those tropes that just frickin' work, right? You have, you get your first glimpses at the Catanian politics with the military, religion, and academy. You have the training session at Villa Telemus. You have the peek at the labyrinth. And then part one ends with the Nakima. How did you guys feel about how that was all done? Like any standouts for you in those chapters?
Dad, if you want to take this, because I have a long thing to say about this.
Well, I'm gonna quibble with you about Ulquiskor as mentor. This is if we want to play on Sarah's thesis about tropes not being subverted, that one kind of is.
Yeah,
because
agreed.
he's not Gandalf, right? He's very clearly not. Your first impression is that, okay, this is now the wise man. This is the Joseph Campbell face of 1,000 heroes, right? That there's always the wise man, the mentor, the father figure. Is it God? Who is this person that's going to guide you through troubles and get you ready to prepare for the challenge? And then it turns out he's not that. Yeah, he's going to get you ready he's going to prepare you for something. But his motives pretty quickly, it is, I think it's revealed pretty quickly that his motives are much more mixed than they are typically. So I think in this case, Islington does subvert that trope of, the wise man, the mentor, etc. So I'll throw that in the mix. In terms of that section of the book, let's see what stands out. I thought, I thought perhaps the more interesting character was the blind woman who's training
Lannister.
him. Say again?
Lannister.
Yeah, right. Yes. That was a good character. Different. And I fully get that in 2023 there was going to have to be a woman, right? This isn't going to be The Hobbit. This isn't going to be 9 dudes on a quest. And oh, look, there's an elf princess. How cute. So I get that in 2023, we're going to need, Daisy Ridley or Rey, or we're going to need Scarlett Johansson or somebody like that. We're going to need, what's Harry Potter's girlfriend? Not the girlfriend.
Hermione?
Hermione. Yeah, we're going to need Hermione. We need that.
Yeah,
that
I'll push back on that
female
though.
peer.
Hermione
But
was
I thought,
1999.
no, you get it. Yeah, but still, the point being that I thought he did it well. In other words, what he didn't do was say, "Oh, here's an ass-kicking warrior who's a 112-pound 20-year-old woman wielding a bastard sword and lifting warriors over her head as she pitches them through stone walls." No, it wasn't that at all. We've had enough internal discussions in the family about this is much more in the Jean Grey, using these crazy mental powers, Twilight. It's much more in that trope of modern fantasy and YA, the young woman with the crazy mental powers. But I thought she was a well done character, and I liked the way he handled having to have a powerful female in the mix.
I agree. She was great. I'm going to take a little bit of a different point of view about these scenes. I loved that he didn't skimp on the training sequence. I think that very early on, it was clear that, to me at least, Viz was going to be a character that definitely skirted the line of the quote unquote Mary Sue / Gary Stu thing. He was going to be really good at a lot of things. He's very kind of naturally intelligent. Seems he can handle himself in a fight. He memorizes things really well. So I think automatically, if you have a character like that, you definitely need to put a lot of obstacles in their path. And I think the function narratively of this very extended kind of training sequence that he has with Lannister, which is over the course of weeks and weeks and multiple months, actually, is that it actually provides a very obvious reason to, when he gets to the academy, for why he is just as good or not better than all of the other students, because he had this actual very intensive, long part of the book that was completely dedicated to it. I think in a lot of modern media, and Dad brought up Rey from the new Star Wars movies, I think that's a perfect example of characters that are just kind of like inherently good at everything, and they don't need any training, and they're just magically great. And it's a trope that I'm over, I'm done with. I've always, from the time I saw Mulan when I was like 5, I've always thought that training sequences were the greatest things ever. I mean, when you have a training sequence kind of soundtrack to I'll Make a Man Out of You, that's kind of like you imprint as a little kid over how awesome training sequences are. But I think they're underused in modern media. I really do. I think that trope is like almost gone by the wayside to kind of skirt, I don't know, to make movies or novels shorter. But I love it. I personally think it's one of the most informative part of the books, because we do see our main character challenged every single day. We are shown, no, he actually isn't just inherently good at everything, because he gets his ass whacked like every single morning. But I love seeing like his actual progression. Oh, he is getting better every day. He's getting smarter. He's getting stronger. He's getting more adept at what he needs to do politically or socially in order to survive in this academy setting. And I thought that, again, it was totally refreshing. It gave us a reason to why Viz, when he gets to the academy, is kind of a superstar and, you know, the best at everything. It gives us actual narrative reasons for that, you know, not notwithstanding the fact that he was born into immense privilege, if you want to use that kind of word, and that he had spent his entire childhood with the best tutors and the best fight trainers and his own royal father to teach him all of these things. So he is not just some kind of poor orphan boy that's just kind of magically great. He has reasons for why he is so good at what he is. And I think that was, again, really refreshing, not to repeat myself.
I agree.
So,
I mean,
I want to throw something in here that I find interesting, because I think it's an open question, or it's a question that Islington leaves open. So the question to you two, and I know, Olivia, I'm stealing your host duties, but I hope you forgive me. Do we think that the Islington does a lot with Viz's anger? Do we think that anger is some sort of a superpower? Is that just a guy who's getting really angry, who's just you know, focusing his natural emotions, feeling his natural emotions to a certain degree? I mean, he's an 18-year-old boy, you know, the hormones are just running furiously. Or is there something else going on there? Because there's a hint that something else might be going on there when he, you know, his vision dims and, you know, he's fighting 2 men in the arena and all this kind of stuff.
I'll let Olivia take it.
I mean, the poor guy lost his entire family and has, you know, lived on his own. Wouldn't you have so much anger in you as well? Like,
Oh, absolutely. I'm asking the question. I
Is
think it's
there
an
like a
interesting question.
supernatural element to it?
Yeah, like that because I'm picking up on Sarah. You know, this is so that right. So who is the in the 20th century, right? The hidden prince story is of course Aragorn, right? Strider. That's it. That's the hidden prince story. And while it's not magic, he does seem to have, Aragorn I'm talking about, he does seem to have some abilities associated with his bloodline.
Exactly. His
and
Dunedain bloodline is important.
Yeah. So it's interesting you bring up Aragorn, because I do find, speaking of tropey, right? Aragorn is the most strong prince, blessed with everything, very one-dimensional character in terms of, I think, how Tolkien writes him.
Well, he can't be a trope. He was the first. So everyone is built from him. I'm sorry, crazy Tolkien, but like he can't be a trope if he was the first.
Yeah, well, okay, I think that's a separate discussion, because
I think
if we go into the God, the ancient Hindu,
exactly,
myths,
and the Indian
Bhagavad
myth,
Gita,
you know,
that's
right,
it.
right. So I think for me, why you can't make that comparison is we're in Viz's head, right? He's so multidimensional in terms of we're understanding.
By the way, Jesus was something of a hidden prince too. Eye roll.
Maybe that's the OG one. No, there must have been one
Yeah.
in like the Quran or somewhere
Probably, yeah. No,
earlier.
absolutely.
No,
Dionysus. I mean, yeah. Anyway,
but anyway, my reaction to this is uh James Islington isn't afraid to go deep on emotions. Like he really is makes you feel and makes you want to understand all of these multidimensional things that Viz is feeling, right? Like he has this code of truth and honor, but his life is a lie. How can you exist, right? How can you move forward with this massive dichotomy happening every second, every day? And to me, I think I don't know. I
So you
love
don't think he's hiding a secret superpower?
no, I do not.
that's fine. Yeah.
So I agree. I don't think he's hiding a secret superpower because I think he's not aware of it. I think that and this, we can start talking about the Nomachia now,
Yeah.
because I think that that's going to be the kind of fulcrum point for which the entire story turns. I do think that there might be, very Aragorn-esque, there might actually be something special with his blood, with his bloodline, with the royal family of Seuss might have some things going on that has to do with will that we might not know the full story of. And I do think that the let's call it hypothesis that him and Alcasaur kind of come up with, why he wasn't affected by the sappers in the very first chapters of the book, the fact that he's never been to the Aurora Columnae, the fact that he's never given will before, seeded will before, that was the hypothesis they came up with, right? I don't think that that's true. I don't think that's close to the full story. I think that in the scene right before the Nomachia massacre, when he meets with Estevan in the barrels of the Colosseum, I do think that there is a bit of an undercurrent, a bit of subtext that we're supposed to be picking up on, that there might be something special in Diago's blood.
Yeah, that was actually really epic. I've never visualized anything quite as creative as that. Like a sea battle in a Colosseum.
Well, it's historically accurate. Dad can back me up on here, but they actually used to, in ancient Rome, they used to flood the Colosseum and have naval battles in the Colosseum.
Really?
So that was 100%.
Totally true.
I believe
Yes.
I'm not talking out of my ass.
Oh
You're definitely
my
not
gosh.
talking out of your ass.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
so that was, good for him. He clearly did a bunch of research on ancient Rome. He, knows most of his stuff. I do think that there is a bit of, he uses the double I a little bit incorrectly, but that's totally me nitpicking.
Yeah, that's you nitpicking. Well, in that moment, there is a really important dialogue between Melkikor and Viz around the innocence of the kind of mass populi, right? Who are they free of guilt or free of blame?
100%. By a mile, that, and again, the will mechanics, but that concept is by a mile my favorite in the book. 100% my favorite in the book. And I think is fascinating philosophically. It's fascinating politically. It's fascinating ethically. It's just, I think it's absolutely completely current issue as well. And where people are going to come to wildly different conclusions. And I think, to his credit, Islington doesn't push you, I don't think, one way or another. I think, Melior and the Angui, what are we going to call them? Anguish, the Angui,
Anguis.
they are, I don't read them as straight up terrorists, right? I'm not reading them that way. Nor, however, am I reading them as freedom fighters, right? They're not the American colonists against the British, nor are they bin Laden's minions. At
Right.
least
And
not
I,
yet.
yeah,
Not yet.
well, yeah. And I think the reason it's complicated is because of the mechanism of the will, right? It's, and this is where, on page 172, they have that back and forth. And he makes a point. He goes, well, they're by definition guilty because they did have a choice to give up their will or not, and they chose to cede, right? They chose to, and for me, how I read this will, it's your being, it's your soul, it's your essence. That's how I kind of pictured it. And I mean, Viz makes a very compelling argument that is worst case scenario, and to give that up, oh, yeah, I mean, you kind of are guilty. And there's that epic line, right? The Octavi are not just guilty, they hoist the entire empire on their shoulders.
Almost they hold the most guilt.
Yeah.
Wow.
However, if the alternative is functional slavery or functional exile, because the vast majority, look,
So we don't know. Yeah, I mean, is it death? Like, that's where I'm actually curious. Through this book, were there examples of any empires that chose not to? Well, I guess they do with Aiden. They all go to the sapper.
And
They
Seuss,
go to the
yes.
sapper.
Seuss,
Yes.
yeah.
Right. Either you go to the sapper if you resist, or you're all killed.
Right.
But
Yeah.
here's the rub, right? If enough people resist, then they have no power.
Yeah.
Their power literally relies on the consent of the Octavi. It's a literal reliance, right? This is not a kind of symbolic reliance, like a lot of kind of in the real world political power or whatever, tyrannical power. This is a absolute literal, the power of the primi and the secundi and all of them completely rely on the willing ceding of will by all of the underclass. And if enough people resisted, I'm not gonna speak like Karl Marx here and say it's the proletariat, but like just generally speaking, if enough people resisted, they literally wouldn't have power. So their power is completely because of the willingness of the underclass to cede their will, to cede their essence. I definitely think of the sappers as those scenes from the Harry Potter movies of the Dementors, like sucking out Harry's soul in the Quidditch match.
Those were so creepy.
No, the better one is the Dark Crystal.
Oh, that too. Oh,
yeah, that where they literally like steal their essence,
steal their life. Yeah,
I think that's actually probably more appropriate because you're left, but you're just a diminished. What do they call not the dark? I wasn't prepared with my Dark Crystal references. Sorry. I'll do better next time.
But you're totally right. And so I do think that scene, I think a little bit later in the book, where we are told, where Viz is told in no uncertain terms, it was the will of the many that killed his family.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in the title, right? It's literally in the title.
Yeah.
Clearly we're supposed to be thinking about it. Clearly we're supposed to be wrestling with that moral question, because I think Viz is desperately wrestling with that moral question.
Ooh, weird contemporary art, if you will, multimedia point. How about a Will of the Many Oppenheimer double feature? Right.
Oh, there you go.
Dropping it was the event at the Nomakia, was that Hiroshima or Nagasaki? And should there be another one? Were the anguish yeah, there you go.
I mean, right, because it is absolutely written. I mean, it's so viscerally written, so I think so brilliantly realized, the viscera and the blood everywhere. It's clearly a terrorist attack, or at least it's an attack that imbues terror.
It's a terrorist attack.
It's a terrorist attack, but also we do have to wrestle with the idea. I mean, just the scene before, we are absolutely meant to be on kind of Estevan's side. He's from Seuss. He's a friend of the family of Viz's, and all of a sudden he kills all these people. I do think
it was insane. I was not expecting that when that happened. I was like, this is brutal.
totally brutal. And it is that kind of 1-2 punch of, okay, clearly this is bad, like thing bad, obviously.
Yeah.
But
Thing evil. Like
thing
this is evil. Yeah.
what's happening. But when Vis gets all the way to him, you as a reader are almost like, you need to kill him, but also, oh my God, he needs to kill him. And then Viz can't do it. He actually can't. He can't
That
bring
was
himself to do it.
heartbreaking. That was
It was so good. Like Viz absolutely did not stop it. He was either, whatever word you want to use, was he a coward? Was he weak? Or was he an 18-year-old kid who was now tasked with killing the last person left from his childhood?
Yeah, I'm so happy he didn't go through with it.
I think
that was the right narrative choice for Viz.
Absolutely the right narrative choice. Yes. I think that it would have been more satisfying if he had actually killed him, but I think we're not supposed to be satisfied in that moment as readers. I don't think satisfaction is supposed to be what we're feeling. So I thought it was the right choice.
Yeah, it was. Oh man, I didn't tear up during that point, but at that point I knew I was in for something special. I was like, okay, it was Islington's really first shot across the bow. Like, we are not dealing with we're not going to tread lightly into the violence and the horror of what living in a society like this would be like. I do think that, we had some other kind of action-packed scenes, like when the Transvect was shot out of bombed. Yeah.
Like, we had all of those things, but this was the first kind of real moment of he's not writing with kids' gloves. Like, this is not some young adult novel for teenagers. Like, this is adult.
Serious. This is adult content, children. Yeah. PG-13 or above. Yes. All right. So then we embark on one of my favorite tropes in fantasy, the university chapters, which, oh boy, the joy this bring me. When we start meeting Calidus, the nerd, Iadon, the strong barbarian man, Amisa, the pretty girl who he starts having a crush on, and this gang starts to assemble, and I am here for it. On top of that, there was just really some other, cool moments in the university, right? I think everyone I've talked to about this book has felt similarly, where the Principalis, right? This big bad guy that you're told killed Ulki Score's brother. When you start reading about the Principalis, you're like, oh my gosh, he's so freaking charming. Like, I immediately was like, I'm kind of on the side of the Principalis. I really like him. I know I'm supposed to hate him, but I don't. And I think that's important. And then within the university, you start getting, at least where I think James Islington gets really good at kind of delving into horror a little bit with these creepy runs into the ruins. And it's one of those weird things where you when you're reading this book, Viz is not going to die. At no point is your beloved main character at risk of death. But I was transfixed in these moments. I could not put the book down. I was enthralled during these ruin runs. Similarly?
Yes, I think that you were almost lulled into a sense of comfort and security by all the cute scenes in dormitories and classrooms, and even like even in the various labyrinth runs, they're seen as kind of way more character building than they are to be in any sort of peril from the characters. And I think that we are absolute veterans of the fantasy genre by now. And so these tropes are incredibly well worn for us as readers. And then we get these weird genre bending scenes of these ruins. That is this sci-fi? Is this horror? What world are we in? You kind of think you understand
humans on walls with stakes through their mouths,
and this odd kind of alien feeling technology that seems to
Yeah.
be completely different than all of the willpower technology that we've been exposed to thus far. And it does really underscore, again, one of my favorite parts of the book is that we are kind of in a post-apocalyptic society, that we are told 300 years ago, which by the way is a very short amount of time, there was a gigantic cataclysm that destroyed the world, or that destroyed all of the world's societies. So we know that in the very recent past, there was some kind of will-based society. We don't know anything about it. All we know is that on the island where the academy is, there's a bunch of ruins from that society. And then when we get our first peek at them, they're totally alien. And I mean that both in kind of both the regular way and both almost in the sci-fi way. They just feel otherworldly. And I do think that it does make you question, are we reading a fantasy book, or are we in some kind of a weird technologically advanced world and we just don't know it yet, and the characters don't know it yet. I do think that, yeah, it did kind of give a shot of adrenaline to the narrative every time that Viz goes on these night runs to these weird ruins.
You're so right. You're so right. It's that craving of, you know, university and classes and getting the gang together, but mixed in with these really fresh, novel moments with these ruins. That to me is what made this book so freaking good. Genius. I loved it.
Even though we have no idea what they are, we don't know. We still, at the end of the book, I mean, we can theorize, right?
Yeah.
But we still have very, very little concrete evidence at what the hell these things are. I do, you know, we can talk about it when we get to the end of the book and those crazy epilogues, but I do think that while we're like, just like you said, while we are getting the gang together, another one of my favorite tropes.
Oh, the best.
We have this kind of parallel narrative of the fact that Viz's benefactors, the whole reason that he gets to go to the university in the first place, are basically holding a gun to his head, being like, you have to do this or else we're going to kill you. Like, you have to go and investigate these crazy things or we'll kill you. It's not like, you know, it's not even veiled threats. It's just very overt. You die. You do this or you die. And so I guess we can move on to the end of the book, unless you guys
no, because there's one moment in the university in the exploration of ruins that I think we all immediately, it was the first moment in the book where I was like, eye roll, where I think
here we go.
We even got a text from Dad being like, I hope this doesn't come back. And it totally was. But you know what? I forgive him for the pup moment. I can forgive him for
Diago, the little wolf pup.
For Diago, the little wolf pup. Don't you forgive him, Dad?
Look, it didn't prevent me from enjoying the book, but it didn't work for me. I didn't like it at all. And I thought that we were done with it when the first time he goes into the larger set of rooms. I think the second set of rooms.
The second time he goes into the last one.
And he stands outside and barks or howls. I was like, okay, he's warning him. That's fair. That's great. But then here he comes, you know, he's Han Solo in the Millennium Falcon, you know, as Luke Skywalker is in trouble and he's clearing the path and and then he lives from, and then I was like, oh, great. He can have now, you know, Islington can have his, because up to that point, he hadn't had his George R.R. Martin moment yet. He hadn't killed anybody, not anybody important anyway. He killed thousands of people, but he didn't kill anybody important.
Right.
And I was like, oh, here we go. Kill the dog. That's what we want. There we go. Kill the dog. That's power. And it doesn't even kill. And not only does he not kill him, you know, so the dog saves him. The dog, you know,
brings him out of the river.
The dog, you know, wipes out all these zombie dudes. And then we think, okay, all right. And then he slinks off to the forest. Okay, we're done with the dog. And then he freaking pulls him out of the river. Come on. Oh, no. I'm out on the dog. I'm
You're
out
out
on the
on the
dog, dude.
dog.
Yeah.
I'm kind of out on it too. I thought it was broadcast too, obviously. There was like
Yeah.
one too many scenes of them warning them about the wolves in like the forest. It was like it got a little
Yeah.
too close to being like, oh god, okay, the wolf pups. You're not gonna do wolf pups better than George R. R. Martin. Like
Yeah.
he wins. I'd say don't even attempt it. I thought again, Dad was so right. It was like one too many. He saved him then. And then he saved him again. And then he saved him one last time.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, you met this dog for 5 seconds.
I agree. And that it was, I mean, I thought that was the weakest part of the book. And it was actually that Elysium, right? The final challenge for
Mhm.
class 3. I thought that was actually the weakest part of the book.
Well,
Minus
before we get there, I do want
Sus?
to
Can we
talk
talk
a
about
little bit
Sus?
about Sus.
Oh!
Sus. I say Seuss.
Sus. Dad, what did you think
need
of
to talk
him
about
going
these
back to
chapters.
yeah, I agree. What did you think of him going back to his hometown?
I liked it. I thought it was well done. I thought the old friend of his, the old advisor to the family, I thought he handled that well. I liked it. I mean, I know, look, it's very much to Islington's credit that he wrote a book that two young women and an almost 60-year-old man could enjoy. I didn't need the making out in the cave.
Oh, I
That's
did. I
fine.
needed every second of that. That
That's
was
fine. Whatever. By the way, but on that point, the other thing I liked about this, and it should be true, and I get it, because this is not only the creation of art in the 21st century. You still have to eat, right? So this is not any kind of a criticism, but I found it very easy, and I mean this as a compliment. I found it very easy to visualize what was going on in this book. There's not a lot of, with the notable exception of the concept of will, which I'm still struggling with. But in terms of the plot and everything, it made sense to me. It was cinematic. So I've talked to you guys endlessly about this. You're kind of casting, the book as you're going along, and so I thought that that you could do a really fun job. I have a clear picture in my head of what the Seuss people look like. What they look like ethnically, what the island looks like. I mean, I can see it. So kudos on that. Similarly with Iden, I have a really good idea. You can see those characters are ready to be cast. And maybe in a different moment we can talk about who should play those roles.
Yeah,
So-
I agree.
yeah, great.
Olivia,
Go.
All right. So I think the trip back home was my, probably, now that I'm done with the book, it's my favorite chapters of the book. I think that the kind of candlelight meeting with the advisor in the secret tunnels, was my favorite bit of dialogue in the entire book, when he tells Diago, and I'll use his real name for these scenes, when he tells Diago about how his family died. And I thought that it was so well done. It was the only point of the book that I actually neared real life tears. I thought him explaining to Diago how his sister was so brave before she was hanged was a really, really great moment. A really beautiful piece of writing by Islington. And I think it was the absolute perfect kind of, I don't know if this is a trope, but it's like that almost deep breath before the final climax of the story. Him kind of, he never got a chance to say goodbye to his family or to his homeland. He was kind of very unceremoniously driven from his home. And this was his chance to say goodbye. And it was his chance to kind of, for the last time, render himself from who he was, to kind of not only say goodbye to his family, but to say goodbye to Diago. And I think that these function so well as this is his kind of last glimpse at his homeland and at his people, because he wasn't just a member, he wasn't just kind of a Seussian, he was their prince, and now that his father is dead, he is very much their king, and him kind of having to let go of that, because I don't think this is going to be a book about him. The story does not seem to me he's going to like come back to Seuss to liberate it like that. I don't think that's what this is going to be. So to him to finally let that go, and to have that almost, you know, come to Jesus moment with the advisor was beautiful. I thought it was actually a moment of real emotive writing from Islington. I think that Islington as a writer, his strongest point, and we talked about this, is his plotting. He's very, very good at plotting. He's also pretty good at character. And I think his prose is very good, but is very like workmanlike, kind of in the vein of Brandon Sanderson. But I thought that these chapters, especially the chapter in the tunnels, was a really, really brilliant piece of emotive writing. And yeah, I can only kind of clap and say, well done. I thought it was brilliant. And it definitely added a really strong layer to who Viz is as a character.
And the bow on that whole scene was the memory that Viz has with his father. They're, you know, on a hike, walking up to a stone, overlooking the ocean, and they had this back and forth around the right to rule, right? And, you know, this very awesome father and son moment. And I want to read this paragraph because I think it has implications in 2023, right? I think this is James Islington. Yeah, this is a fantasy book, but again, I think one of the power of fantasy is that I think it captures human and current times actually better than even some, you know,
Literary fiction.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, so there, in this phrase, or in this paragraph, he says, I want you to understand that no country's governance is perfect. Anyone who looks at a system of people and thinks the system is the problem is a fool. But I also want you to understand that the hierarchy is far more insidious because it's not imperiled by a flaw. It is built on one. The flaw of greed. I mean, that's epic writing.
Yeah, it's really good. I do think that it's almost ironic how the almost more moral form of government is a monarchy, right? I think that this is not to bring this layer into it, but this was a funny book to read as a Catholic. You know, an entire religion built on a very stringent hierarchy, but also as, you know, an American. And I think that to have the almost more moral form of government be this, you know, very traditional monarchy in comparison to the more, not democratic, but a more kind of hierarchical system.
Caste-like system.
Caste-like, that's a good word. Caste-like system. It's interesting. It's fascinating from like a Western perspective. So like, what is the actual best form of government? And yeah, and I think that, again, we brought it up earlier with the, you know, the whole idea of the fact that it is the will of the many. And I think that it's in the necropolis scene, right, where we meet Relucia and who Relucia is for the first time. We've met her before, which is, you know, Alcasor's wife, and how she tells Viz in no uncertain terms that it was the will of the many that killed his family. It wasn't the hierarchy. And yeah, I think what a brilliant moment, and what an interesting thing to chew on. Like, okay, whose fault is it? Is it the Octavi? Yeah, who's the real culprits here? Who are the real evil ones?
Greed is the real evil.
It can be. Clearly that's
or it's clearly the will, right? Like I think there's a reason we're not meant to understand the will yet, because I think it'd be really cool for the will. It's almost like its own character in a sense, you know, like it's hungry, it needs to be fed, it's this wants to gobble up everything, you have to go to the columns, like sacrifice yourself, like it's almost a character in a way. And I wonder if I can't wait to read more because I wonder if that's the angle this
I
goes in.
really have to, I actually, now that you bring it up, I actually do have to credit Islington with one thing. I think that it was a very easy choice it would have been a really, really easy choice to kind of frame all of the kind of upper people as needing Will almost like an addiction metaphor.
Mm,
And he doesn't. I don't think there is
no.
ever any point in the book where he kind of, oh, they need this to live, right? And I actually think that it's good for him for not going the easy route with that, because I think that would have been like a pretty easy
Right.
choice to almost make it like meth or
Instead,
alcohol or whatever.
instead, I think he explores power as the addiction.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. 100%. And I think greed, I think this is obviously not a monetary greed. This is a greed for power. And so I do think that this is all about power structure, power systems,
Yeah.
levels of power. You know, the Octavi give their will for a modicum, a tiny little piece of a possibility that one day they can rise. You know, because they know if they never seed, they'll never rise. But they seed anyway for that tiny little like hope that one day they could. And yeah, it's fascinating psychologically for sure.
What did you think of, really quick digression, but what did you think of Viz's choice to join the census and not
It was
government?
at the end of the book.
Yeah, at the end.
It was a hedge. I like it. I thought it actually, first of all, it completely made sense with this character. Viz had been unable to commit the whole book. He was absolutely in his head about which side was right, which side was wrong. He's always been kind of for himself. He was unwilling to be anyone's actual real plaything. He didn't want to go with the Anguis. He didn't want to go with Alcasor in the hierarchy. He kind of has absolutely refused from the very first chapter, right? He has refused to cede Will. And I think him going the censor route absolutely makes complete narrative sense with who he is as a character. And it's almost, again, like on the positive, yeah, he's going his own path. He refuses to be anyone's puppet. But on like the other side, he's totally and completely indecisive, and he refuses to actually make a commitment to fighting one person or the other. He's not going to be on the Anguis side, and he's not going to be on the hierarchy side, and that can be frustrating. It's not like the best, he's not being his virtuous self here. He's almost hedging his bets in a weird way.
So,
and I think that's brilliant.
I agree. And I actually think that, I don't know if you felt this way at all, but in the beginning, when you read about Viz's strict morality against the columns, and right, you see his back torn up because he refuses to cede, and you are backing him 100%. You are like, you do not go near that column. You stay as far away. I mean, you know, you feel, you had that visceral feeling of, you know, I'm going to back you. But at the end of the book, I'm like, go to the columns, man. You know, like, you got to play the long game here. Like, my morality kind of evolved, if you will, when it came to this subject, because you recognize there's kind of a bigger bad at play, and do you guys feel that transformation at the end where you were kind of like, go, you got to go, you got to play the game, you got to go to the column? Did you feel that?
100%. I think, especially after Calidus's death, I think you start as a reader being like, okay, I no longer care about whatever moral objection you have to ceding Will. Like, you have to now play the game, or people who I love are going to die. People who I, as a reader, who have grown to really, really like, who I don't want to see die. I'm like, you could actually save them. You could actually do something here. And he kind of refuses. He kind of refuses to do it. And I think that, first of all, narratively, that's the correct way to do it. I think frustrating your reader is sometimes necessary. But yeah, I absolutely had that moment of like, okay, you're no longer a kid. We are no longer playing moral, ethical games. You kind of have to, crap on the pot or get off, Viz.
100%.
time to do
Which-
something.
Which, do you have a sense of if he joins the census, he has to seed? Yeah, he has to go to the column, I assume.
No, I think that that's the reason he chose it, is because it's one of the few.
So it's a little bit of a cop out to me. It's a little bit of a.
Well, we'll see. He might have to anyway, but
I guess he
again-
did lose an arm. He did sacrifice his arm.
well, again, I think that he will have to start seeing well, because we're again, we now know that
Yeah.
the reason that Lannista's blind is because she probably ran the
Yeah, the
labyrinth
maze.
and
Mhm.
something happened to her and she lost her sight. And the only way that she can see again is by using will. So I think the only, Viz is now crippled, and will he have to, seed will in order to.
Well, no, because we got a sense of his superpower in that final challenge.
Well, is that a superpower?
The Eutychium. Yeah, it's like the tracker, the Spidey senses, right?
Right, but again, I'm talking more about, okay, that's one of the consequences of him.
Oh, you think there's going to be another?
On the other, are we going to talk about what happens on the other side of the labyrinth now?
Yeah, that's the last bullet point that we'll get to. But
Okay.
hold up. You think that there's going to be a greater superpower at play here that Viz has,
I don't know
other than these Spidey senses?
I think that there's something in his Susian blood that we have yet to encounter that might make seeding will complicated. I don't know. There's so many, in my opinion, there's so many possibilities for Islington to go with regards to who Viz is, and if his kind of innate, his innate genetic traits, like him being from Seuss, will that actually have an effect on how will affects him? I think yes. I think this book absolutely points to multiple ways that actually, it's not just because he hasn't been to an Aurora Column Day. I think that there is something innate within Viz or in Viz's bloodline, in the Susian royal bloodline, that makes him particularly special. But I also think what happened to him after the labyrinth is also going to complicate things, because that
so
totally changes everything.
What are we working with here? Now, the chapter of this epilogue is called the Synchronism.
Synchronism, yes, it is.
Synchronism. Is this a parallel universe?
Totally. I think, multiverse so hot right now, right? It is.
I wasn't thrilled about this when I read it. I was like, okay, we're playing with time here. I was like, what?
Well,
this was such a perfect fantasy tied up in a boat. Like we were working with so much already that I was like, did we need to open up the fifth dimension? Did we?
Well, here's the thing. I don't think we're working with time travel. I think time travel's out. Okay. So that's good. So I don't think we're going to have to worry about time travel. But I do think that it is one of two things. I'm hoping it's the latter. It is either completely parallel universes, or what I think, something that, I actually haven't talked to you about. This could be like teleportation in a way, because clearly the two environments that we get to see, other than the main environment of where he was on the island, like one was super snowy, right? Like it was like at the top of a mountain. Like maybe we're just being teleported to another point in the world, and that's where Alcasor's brother has been kind of hiding out. Or these are just fully parallel universes. I think the synchronism lends it towards parallel universes, that these are kind of three, you can't see it, three separate universes that are moving at the same time. Yeah. And that him running the labyrinth gave him the power to kind of copy himself, so that he can exist in, sorry, I hit the mic. He can exist in three universes simultaneously. I don't know. I have thought about this for so long. Well,
then does that mean there is a copy of the brother running around somewhere?
Well, clearly not. I mean, clearly there isn't a copy in the main world that we're in.
because that copy died. See, this is where it gets funky to me.
I don't know. I don't know.
I oh. And this is my, like, I don't want to spend too much time in this. I really hope it's a teleportation piece.
Yeah.
But what? He bounces there, then he bounces back really quickly. And then why can't the other guy bounce back?
But the reason it couldn't be just teleportation is because he does run, he kind of carves, that's the word I'm looking for. He carves run into his own arm in one of the universes so that it appears on his body in the main
it's not teleportation. It's some sort of parallel universe at play here.
And he copied himself, right? Like that was what happened when he was like brought up into the air and there was that thing of light and everything vibrated after the labyrinth, right?
Yeah.
He was being copied, or he was being I don't know. That's how I read it. I do think I trust Islington. I have to say, again, the strongest part of this book was its plotting. I trust
it really
him
was.
fully. I totally trust that he's going somewhere cool with this, and that it's not going to be stupid, and that it's not going to be kind of, hand wavy, and he's just kind of like gonna ignore this. I trust that this is important and that this is also thematically relevant, because the other part of this book that was so strong was him meshing character and theme and plot all together. He did a very, very good job with that. So yeah, I totally trust him. I might not get it now, and I might be totally confused about what the heck happened at the end of the Iacoudium. But yeah, I trust it's going somewhere.
Yeah. I agree. And I did appreciate the glossary at the end because I needed a lot of help in understanding these terms.
We also need to talk about the other epilogue because you and I have incredibly different interpretations of it. I might be completely stupid, but you go.
His father is dead. His father has died.
Yes.
Right? Like, we acknowledge that his father is dead.
Totally.
He was hanged.
He was.
And then we know he's hanged. And then we get this scene with him and his father when he's clearly in a coma, right? He's in the infirmary. He's unwell, right? He's in a state of being
unconscious.
Yes.
Near death.
And then you have this moment where he comes back and he's having this conversation with his father. I don't remember exactly what they said, but what I do remember is at the end of it, you have this toy that was missing from the cupboard. Right, from the cupboard in Sus. And that says Diago. So someone put it there in his infirmary bedside table. My immediate thought, the Prince Pales knows
who he is.
I immediately went to, this charming guy who, by the way, like, actually in the scope of this book didn't hold that much weight, right? Like, yeah, he had his hands in some things, but nothing that astronomical. Like, he didn't hold a significant amount of sway towards the plot one way or the other, which is why I think in the next book he's going to have to play a much bigger role, and this is his moment of revealing, I know. That's my theory. Anyway,
I think that you could be completely spot on. I have a lot of reasons why I think something different. I think, first of all, again, we know the trope of like, you're unconscious or you're near death and you get visited by a loved one who's also dead. Like, that couldn't be more of a trope. Like, and then he talks to you and he encourages you, no, don't go towards the light, go back, fight. I mean, we even have that in the Lord of the Rings movie after Frodo gets
Harry Potter, classic.
Harry Potter, the famous one with Dumbledore.
Railroad scene. Oh, it's one of my favorites. Low-key one of my favorites. It's a great scene.
Yeah. Is this happening in my head or is it real? one of the greatest.
One of the greatest.
Why should that mean it isn't real? Relevant to what I'm about to say, actually, a relevant line to what I'm about to talk about. I think that, so the reason I think that it might have actually been his father, and that it was his father that left the boat that has Diago on it.
You're
Wait,
so wrong.
hear me
You're
out,
so
hear me out.
wrong.
I could be completely stupid, but I do think that, so his father talks to him again, like he knows exactly what's happened to Diago. He clearly understands, like, that he doesn't just have the knowledge of before he died. Like, so clearly this either figment of Viz's imagination or this actual real visit that he gets from his dad has knowledge of the Iudicudium. It has knowledge of who Viz is now as a person. So there's that, number one. And number two, I do think Islington tries a little too hard in the writing to make us believe that this is just a specter. This is just kind of this is not real, that this is just all happening in Viz's head. He goes out of his way multiple times, and I'm not going to read the full bit, but I encourage you, if you're reading this, to go back and read that section of the last bits of this book. And he almost goes out of his way to make it so obvious that, oh, it's that Viz's father isn't real. This is not actually happening. This is a specter. This is a phantom. This is a ghost. It's like almost you're hit over the head with it. And then, okay, so this is this beautiful moment with his dad. And then the next scene is this very info dumpy scene, this scene that has so much information where Viz gets visits, not just from Viridius, but from this like council thing. And we're just dumped on information. We get so much of this stuff that almost make us not forget the scene with his father, but make us think of something completely different. And okay, Viz makes his choice. He's going to be a census and like all of these things. And then the very last line of the chapter is him looking at his bedside table and seeing the boat with Diago on it. And it was made really obvious to us earlier in the book during the Susian chapters that this boat was missing. I mean, Viz remembered it.
Right.
He remembered it as almost in line with his father. He remembers it as being, he did it for his father. He got it from his father. It's almost completely connected to him and his relationship with his dad. And then we get the scene with his dad. We get all of these kind of really big moments, this kind of the end of the book. And at the very end, we see the boat.
So do you think the father ran the maze?
No, the father left.
The father.
I think.
Okay, but how? How? So, like, if we're
I
playing
don't know.
in this multi-universe,
I don't know. It has maybe something to do with who the Sus are, the Sus royal bloodline, at least who they are.
They're immortal.
No. I think his father. Look, I think this is very. And again, I do think the fact that, I'm now forgetting his name, but Ulcasor's brother. What's his name?
I don't remember, but let's call him Ulcasor's brother.
He was also supposed to be dead, right? He was also very much supposed to be dead. And then we see that he's not dead. Look, I could be completely stupid.
I'm not buying what you're selling. But look, again, it could totally be Viridius being like, I know who you are. Yeah, I think it's Viridius. That's where my vote's going.
Okay. I think it's something more special.
I don't think we need anything more special. That's the thing. Like, I think with how the book ended, all of the open questions around this synchronism, do we need anything more special? I would say no.
True. I mean, I reread this, by the way, I reread the synchronism stuff right before we started this, and still not any more clear. I have
no.
It's from the first time that I read it, I immediately, ironically enough, me getting the entire rest of my family, and it is the entire rest of my family, to read this book is solely because when I finished it, I needed someone to talk about the synchronism bit with. because I did not understand fully, and I needed
Yeah.
sounding words. And there wasn't a whole lot of info or discussion online with this book because it had only just recently came out. And I needed someone people I knew in real life to talk about it with, because I just was like bursting at the seams. And huge credit to Islington for that. I think those are the best kinds of books that you sit with and you're just like, I need to talk about this with other people.
Okay. So this is what we get. This is like the most descriptive piece of information
For it.
or I would say clues we get. It's sealed against the tools of the enemy after the rending. The passage to Lucium requires a tool to ensure validity. A toll to ensure validity.
So clearly for Viz, that toll was his arm. And for
Sealed
Lanista,
against the tools of the enemy. Sealed against.
So clearly, so again, this part I get. Sealed against the tools of the enemy after the rending. So is the rending the apocalypse that totally destroyed the world?
Right.
Like, or was this the cause of the apocalypse? I think that rending clearly is the apocalypse, the thing that
agreed.
That destroyed the world. So the passage to Lucium, I think that's very obviously the parallel world, or like, right? Like is either the snowy mountain.
It's one of them.
It's one of the parallel worlds.
Right.
And in order to get there, you have to pay a toll. And I think that toll is paid through blood. Or body parts in this.
Or body parts. An eye,
or just an arm. It is a heavy, heavy ass toll. Like we could say that.
Okay. I just had so thought. I think so. You know how right under it, right? There's those two circles embedded right under it. He says, and they're overlapping like a pie chart, right? Or not a pie chart, like in math class you have those circles, and then it's like the things in the middle are the ones that overlap. Well,
a Venn diagram.
I think there's three worlds. There's Lucium, the other one that was a password. What was the password?
Oh yeah, it was Lucium, and what was it? You find it.
I'm not going to find it, but there was that other one, and then the current world. So there's these three, right? That classic circle on the top, circle on the left, circle on the right. Is that a Venn diagram?
Venn diagram.
Yeah.
Here, let me actually look it up, because I have
So that's what we're working with here. And Viz went to one of those circles.
Oh, so the other words is the obitum, or the obiteum.
Okay. So we have. Yeah. So we have
one of the worlds is Lucium, and one of the worlds is obituum. And if you know Latin, I think I'm pretty sure that one is similar to one is similar to heaven and one is similar to hell, or something like that. Let me just okay, for example, everyone knows what an obituary, so I'm going to get on my Latin SAT word high horse here. So what's an obituary, Olivia?
An obituary is a list of names of people who have died.
Yeah, it's kind of like you turn to it in the newspaper online, and it's like a nice thing that someone writes after someone passes away. So what are the first three letters of obituary, Olivia? OBI. So I think obituum is clearly a made-up word. It's not an actual Latin word. It's something that Islington made up. But we can figure, etymologically speaking, OBI is death.
And Luce is light.
Lucaeum is light.
Oh,
right. So we can get all Latin here. And so clearly,
oh my God. So are we in purgatory? Are we in the middle realm? Oh my God. Are they throwing a lost plot at us?
So God, speaking of, no, that's actually a good point. Is Lucium heaven and obituum actually the other thing I was thinking of is, what's that place in Stormlight Archive? that they have to go to.
Oh, the spiritual
No, the heralds are like forced to go to that hell planet. Remember? I know this is
yes,
but
yes,
like
but
it's,
it
so
won't.
it's
Yeah,
similar to that, right? Like Obi-Toon could be hell, or could be the place where all dead souls go. And
And
Lucam could be
a toll
I
to ensure a toll to ensure validity. Like what's to ensure validity about what? Like what validity? Like what do you have to be, that you're human, that you're unspoiled by
I
will?
think I don't think it's that. I don't think it's that. I think it's just like maybe that you've ran the labyrinth, that you are
Okay. Okay.
worthy.
Hmm.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Like I just want to make sure that Luke Latin etymology. I think it means, yeah, it does mean light. So yeah, so
Wow.
clearly one is has a positive connotation, and one has, I don't know if death is a completely negative connotation, but definitely like a more controversial connotation.
Yeah.
Definitely more bad. So yeah, food for thought. That definitely means something.
Wow. I'm gonna go to bed thinking about this now. All right, anything else you want to add? You want to chat about?
I'm just, I'm waiting with bated breath for book 2. And also I just want to give props to Islington, because he comes from the self-publishing world. And I think it's awesome to see people who really got their start self-publishing their novels. So he wrote the Lycanius trilogy. That's his first trilogy of books. And that's how I knew him. And I just think it's awesome to see authors evolve and to see their writing improve, and to see him, write something that I think is so excellent. Proves that you don't just have to come through kind of the traditional publishing channels to be successful in this genre. And I think fantasy needs more people like Islington, in my opinion.
I agree. And for me, this is so clearly inspired by The Name of the Wind. And I'm so grateful for him, because so much of the time when I recommend The Name of the Wind to my peers, it's hard to find another book similar to that in terms of like the fantasy catalog. A lot of them are more high fantasy, can maybe be a little bit more intense with world building and magic systems that might not be the best for potential beginners, where this is now going to be my go-to like second book that I'm going to be dropping for like entry into fantasy. Just like
this is a good gateway drug novel,
100%,
in my opinion.
100%.
You're right.
This is right up there with Name of the Wind in terms of getting people into fantasy and excited about fantasy.
Agreed, fully.
All right. This ends our podcast. I love you. And
Love you too.
see you next week.